This week on Casual Watch Talk podcast, we do our watch obsessions for the week, and then we talk all about what it means to have a luxury watch. What is luxury? What is luxury to us? What are good alternatives to luxury watches? What we look out for when we're judging whether a watch is luxury or not. Keep listening to find out more. Hi everyone, welcome back to Casual Watch Talk podcast for another thrilling episode. Todd, how have you been this week?
Doing well. Having a good time sort of navigating our new world as we talked about last week, but still here.
Yes, yeah, we're still here. We're still here. Anyway, what watch are you currently wearing?
Today, I decided to go. I was feeling the need to have a little bit of a tooly watch, and so I brought back out one of my Seiko Tunas, the one with the sort of anthracite gray dial on the, I know, not sponsored, but the Bark & Jack NATO strap, because it just looks NATO style strap, right? We don't get anybody in trouble.
Yes.
The Bark & Jack NATO style strap, which I think it's a perfect combination.
Yeah, I think actually you can still call it a NATO because he is UK based. I think that patent troll is only in the US, is my understanding.
All right, fair enough.
So
all right,
you might get away with it. We may get a cease and desist letter ourselves.
Yeah, we'll get in trouble.
But I'm wearing. Yes, I'll get in trouble. Well, I'm wearing my Seiko SNE 598. I'm actually wearing it on a it's not really a NATO, but it's like a NATO fabric strap that I got from the guys over at Canadian Strap Mill. So that's pretty cool. Quick release sort of nylon two-piece strap, which I'm quite enjoying. And I'm actually going to be getting some straps from Frog Squad Straps, which is a friend of the channel, Luke. He's in our message group. He works on these. He was in the military and he works on these military straps. And what he thinks he's done is found an old plan of a strap that the SBS used, and he's remade the strap essentially. So that'll be quite interesting. It's not a NATO; it is a fabric strap, but it's not a NATO. So
two-piece, or
quite interested to see that.
Is it a two-piece style strap? Oh, no, so it's a pass-through. Okay.
Yeah, it looks similar. It's got the similar hardware to a Zulu strap, but it's using a different material and also a different fastening system. I think it's got a keeper on it as well.
Oh, okay. Well, I look forward to seeing it.
Hopefully, when those arrive tomorrow, I will do the review of those. And I'm also going to take them to Wind Up on the 15th with the hopes that I can show at least the SBS one to Elliot Brown and see what they think, considering they're one of the makers of the watches for an elite military unit, as they say on their website.
With that being said, I kind of really wish that more watch manufacturers would do sort of the fixed lug approach like the Pelagos. I mean, I think it would be kind of cool because that's proper safe watch, because I think we've talked about it on the stream. NATOs can be a little scary sometimes because they do put tension on those spring bars and it's not really ideal, but a solid lug pass through that's like you only can ever wear that style of strap. I'd like to see Seiko have an offering in their dive watches that they had one that's fixed lugs. I think it'd be cool.
Yeah, I always use those fat spring bars, which are, I think they're 1.8 millimeters thick or something, that they have a really heavy duty spring in them. So I always use those if I'm using a NATO style strap or a strap like that, because I've had that happen.
Yeah, me too.
A couple of times where the spring bar fails, and you often see it, don't you, on forums where they're like, "Oh, the spring bar really saved my watch," and it was like, well, sort of. Have you ever had a normal watch strap fail?
Never. Yeah, it's one of the. I mean, I understand in a military application that is a very serious concern, and there were a lot of watches I think that were issued back in the day that had that fixed spring bar approach, and even with the fat ones, what I get nervous about is, unlike the Turtle has a pretty robust spring system or a spring bar system, the pinholes are still tiny on most watches. Even if you get a big fat spring bar, that final part where it connects to the watch is still tiny, which makes me, always makes me nervous.
I think Seiko's probably the thickest non-fixed spring bar, isn't it, on that?
Oh yeah, on the Turtle it's huge. It makes it difficult to get sometimes other watch straps because it'll especially the ones that already have the spring bars, like the quick release, they tend to almost want to fall out because it's such a large opening, so they are robust.
Yeah, that's why I always liked Larry over at Uncle Straps, previously Uncle Seiko Straps, was he would always sell straps that accommodated the thicker spring bar. But you're right, if you get a quick release, it's quite hard to get that thick.
Yeah, hard to get it to work. And I've even had to, on some, I've made the sacrifice and wiggled and broke the quick release off and then kind of gently pounded through a big fat spring bar on some leather or some rubber straps just to have some options for my Seikos.
I've absolutely done that. I tell you one thing that I've never learnt my lesson on. Never learnt my lesson on is shortening a rubber strap. It never looks good.
Yeah.
Like you can never get that to look
No, I don't. That is purely utilitarian tool. You know, I'm about to become. I'm an operator going into the thick of it, and I don't care what the strap looks like because it doesn't look good when you go with your friends to the club and they're like, "What happened to your watch strap? Did you gnaw that off?"
Because you can never get that cut clean. Yeah, you can never get that cut
Yeah.
clean. Well, have you had a watch obsession this week?
So the watch obsession, and everybody's going to laugh because here we are again. We're going to be the shills for Christopher Ward Watch Podcast. But was that an act? You could tell me after I say this. That seemed, I thought it was just clever marketing, but it seems like there was a mistake with the launch of this Sealander and the ice blue. But that is one gorgeous watch. And I'm debating. I know you mentioned in the WhatsApp group that you're still a fan of the Dragonfly blue, but this ice blue one with the blue 24-hour hand is stunning on the consort bracelet. That is a gorgeous watch. And it makes me second guess my Polar one that I love. It is part of my permanent collection where I look at that and go, oh, I don't know if I like that better or not. I'm really torn. That is a beautiful watch. But what was the story with that release?
It is marketing genius if you thought that they planned it,
Yeah.
but I don't think they actually did plan it. They essentially announced the release of this blue GMT, Sealander GMT, but in the body of the email, they said introducing the new 38mm 12. So they got the name of the watch wrong in the body of the email. It was correct in the title, but then they sent a subsequent email which just said, oops.
Yeah.
It was something like, oops, we got it wrong.
Yeah.
And that's the first email that I saw.
Me too.
So it was kind of unintentional clickbait. I can imagine somebody's like, oh, we'll just do a correction email and say, oops. But it was pretty marketing genius because that immediately drew your eye. Christopher Ward, oops, we messed up. What could that be about?
100%. Like I had to read the email. I missed the other one. Then I read this and then I saw that watch. And I was like, wow, how did I miss that watch? So that was my obsession as of this morning.
It was so funny because I think my watch obsession probably would be that Dragonfly one. But we can't pick the same watch, can we? Because that Dragonfly GMT, that blue, it's the one watch that I always think about. You know, when you're thinking, oh, which watch could be next, I do always think about that watch. Maybe I should just pick it up or whatever. Or I'm going to have another look at Dallas Wind Up. They'll definitely have one there. There also is a new watch that they're coming out with, which it's a bit early to talk about, but I'll be interviewing them on launch day, which is it's a variation of a model they've had before, but that also looks really cool. I did see, actually, I'll change my watch obsession. I did see on last Friday after we recorded the podcast, I went into the tag store. We went to Tampa.
Yeah.
We drove to Tampa from where we live, which was took us an hour and a half to get there and then 3 hours to get back. The traffic is absolutely brutal around there. We went into the tag store and I saw the new Tag F1 chronograph that we've been talking about, the mechanical chronographs. They are big, but they wear really well. They really wear well. Titanium, and it's a big old watch, but it wears beautiful.
I saw the pictures you posted and it looked great. I mean, I go back to what we talked about, in our previous podcast, like the Tag, I don't know who they got as the lead designer over there now, but they have definitely changed their game.
And especially on the Aqua Racer, like I wouldn't have looked twice at the Aqua Racer. And even, you could argue the current version isn't even a million miles away from it wasn't like they completely ground up, redesigned the watch, but the little tweaks of that wave dial, the fattening of the hour hand that also incorporates the silhouette of the Tag Heuer logo. It with little subtle tweaks, suddenly it really appeals to
It's a striking watch, and that is another one of those ones that I let go. Actually, I had a really nice, I think it was like a 90s version that I was trying to liquidate to get a different watch, and my son actually bought it off of me, and when I see him wear it, I'm like, oh, I like that watch, I want that back. Yeah, so because I was gonna sell it, he's like, "Oh, I'll buy it." And I'm like, "Okay." So, and I sold it to him at a really good price because it's my son. So I took a bath on that one. That's okay. It's my son, but yeah, it's a beautiful watch.
Oh wow! Well, at least it stayed.
That's right. Yeah. It's Like I said, every time I see him wear it, I smile a little bit and get a little bit jealous.
My dad likes watches, but look, he does have a nice IWC, but he also really loves the outdoorsy Pro Treks and stuff like that. So if ever I get a Pro Trek in for review, I'd ask him to.
Nice.
So he doesn't have a very expensive taste in watches. Let's dive into our main topic here, which, in fact, Todd, do you want to introduce it? You've been looking into this one. I think it's quite
well. I think it's an interesting one to sort of, and especially the sub points that we kind of want to talk about. But it's buying affordable watches versus luxury watches. Does it make sense? No, it probably. Let's just start right out of the gate. Buying a luxury watch doesn't make sense. Done. End of statement. But there is an allure to the luxury watch, and you start to go, am I going to be satisfied with the affordable watch? And I think that's sort of the conversation, at least for me. Can I find something that I'm like, I'm comfortable with that, and that scratches the itch, or will it never? So that'll be the sort of the discussion we'll have as we talk about the sort of the finer points of this. But Sam, where do you land on that? Is there a better option? Will an affordable watch ever satisfy you versus no, I got to go all in, save?
This is a very complex conversation. And when I think about this, I don't think of like homage watches that are basically a copy of luxury watches. There are a lot of watches that are very similar to other watches from main brands, like Seiko's done Lucky Likey's. Everybody borrows. Correct. It's like car companies, isn't it? The high-end car companies see a trend and then they borrow from each other for it. Like there's that Hyundai Ioniq 6 that looks a cheeky bit like a Porsche, or even Tesla that looks a little bit cheeky like a Porsche. And they're not direct copies, obviously, but they are Lucky Like. Yeah. They've inspired by homaging them. For me, when I see this question asked about, or I see uploads about, is there affordable alternatives to this watch? From my own point of view, I think that usually the answer is no. Okay. I don't think, if you really like a watch, if you really like, for example, we use Rolex as the example all the time, but say there's something else that you really like the look of. If you were really hankering after a Submariner, a watch that's slightly like a Submariner, or a Datejust is another example, or the million different versions of the Explorer that there are, I think sometimes it's difficult. Now, there are a few exceptions to that. I don't think it's a direct homage, but obviously the Christopher Ward GMT that we just talked about that we both love, that has the bezel of a... Yep. You could argue that as a bezel of a GMT Master 2, but almost every other detail about the watch is not anything else like the Explorer 2. And I do really like that watch because of its own.
Except for, I think also the orange hand is also on the polar dial is similar to that. But you're right. And I was going to come to that. I guess we're going to jump ahead a little bit because, well, why not? We're already here. That watch, I have always liked the Rolex GMT. That design language was just a striking watch. And, I always liked it when Adrian would put that one on his channel and like, man, that's a beautiful watch. But I will say I bought that Christopher Ward because I thought, wow, that scratches a lot, or ticks off a lot of the boxes for me for that watch that I probably won't be able to afford, but I can afford this Christopher Ward. And now when I see them side by side, I actually think the Christopher Ward was done more elegantly. There's the way the indices are on the dial are more like an Oyster Perpetual as opposed to sort of those big blocky, they say blocky, but they're circles. The big indices that are on the Rolex dial almost look more cheap by comparison when they're side by side. And it actually has scratched the itch for that watch for me personally. And I kind of like it actually better. Plus it won't cost me a fortune to service.
Yeah, I agree. I also have like an aversion to the Mercedes hands. I've never loved the Mercedes hands on Rolex. Yeah. There is that. I suppose it's subjective, this, isn't it, in terms of, but I think in most cases, if ever I can't think of a good example, but this is a good example, Dan Henry, and they create watches that I would say are homage watches. Yes. Like you can tell where the inspiration has come from, but they are not direct copies of watches. Correct. With one exception. I think the one exception is their Porsche design similar. I think they call it the 1972. Oh, yeah. Which is very much like a Porsche design, or one of the Zinn watches has that similar. And I like that watch, but I probably wouldn't get it because I I like the original too much and it's too close to the original.
I think the thing that gives them a pass on that for in the moment of time when they came out with that watch, the other one had been discontinued and was not really accessible or available, because that was part of Dan Henry's sort of thing, was the personal collection of the owner of the brand. He had all of those old watches. And so he would go, I like this one and I want to create one that has that vibe. And I think you can give him a pass on for that time. But then since then, retro has been so popular, they did reissue that exact watch.
I wouldn't buy that Porsche design watch because I think the pricing is way over.
Yeah.
Way over what it should be.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that I can't afford it, or I think it's not worth that money.
Oh, I would.
What they want for like 10 grand for like I think it's a Valjoux 7750 in there or whatever it is. But Zinn make one that's I think 2,500, which is every bit as.
Yeah. Yeah. I actually have a Dan Henry. I have I think the 1964, and that one had this really beautiful aesthetic that looks a lot like the new Tag glass box that just came out, which again, you're like, oh, well, but that watch wasn't available when it came out, but it's, he did come up with some really cool stuff. The unfortunate thing is they just didn't feel as robust in the hand. You could tell you were getting sort of a fashion brand watch, like you might get at a department store, as opposed to something with some real body to it.
They were quite the darling of the review community.
They were.
I actually asked him once if I could borrow a watch to review, and he said, no, we don't give or loan watches for review. You can buy one and then return it. And I was like, no, I'm not really that bothered to do it. But I remember at one time there was a lot of YouTube reviews on it, and they seem to have, somebody on Watch Crunch was talking about them the other day, and they'd recently bought one. So I know that people are still buying them. It's not like it's defunct, it is still going. But his whole thing was that he was quite, doesn't he have like 1,000 watches?
Yeah, he's got some big, huge collection.
Established watch collector.
Yeah, he's got a huge collection,
but that's a shame. But in the hand, is it more like magazines used to get into in the 90s, fountain pens of the world, fountain pens of famous people, and it'd be like, oh, this was Churchill's, and they've been replica, and it was like a bit.
Yeah, I think that's the only thing that I don't love about it, is that we pull it out and it's like what we talked about last week when you get in it, and we probably will in this conversation. There's just, you can tell like, well, this was made sort of in a sort of a Chinese factory kind of vibe. It's not, it doesn't have that same heft to it that you go like, this is a real durable, reliable watch that I think that I could have for a lifetime. But for the price, it shouldn't. It's in just above Swatch pricing. And if I were going to get a Dan Henry versus a Swatch, I would get a Dan Henry every time if those were my two options at the same price point, because I'm just getting something that, I can change the battery in, it's serviceable and not disposable. So, from that perspective, he wins for sure, hands down, in my book. I mean, I know there's diehard Swatch collectors who are screaming at their dashboards right now, but that's just me.
And this has changed over time, but I guess my opinion is that if you really, the whole affordable alternatives, I think there's a fine line. There is watches, we mentioned Christopher Wall, but there's a lot of others, isn't there? Like for example, those Venzianicos that I review that I really like, they have a slightly submarinary type case, but they're not quite there. So there's definitely things that I like in some watches where they've perhaps improved on. I think that's what a true homage is, isn't it? Where you're borrowing an inspiration from one watch. You're not directly copying it, and sometimes you're even improving it. Mark at Long Island Watches does with some Seikos, where he riffs on the idea and then in some cases improves, or say a lot of cases improves the aesthetic and the equipment, stuff like that. So I think there's that part of it as well. But oftentimes, and sometimes luxury watches are completely unobtainable by people, by
most people.
Certainly, there's watches I know I will never own. Yeah.
Venzianico actually has a nice new integrated bracelet watch too that they just brought out. That's again in that homage world, but it's a great looking watch. I thought, oh, I'm kind of that's on my radar as one of those. I like, and I'm not trying to get like in something that looks like the Tissot PRX. I like that. Is it Mayan or Mayan?
Yeah, Mayan.
They've got a beautiful one, the Manhattan, I think they call it. It's got its own vibe, but it looks of that genre. Same thing with this Venzianico one. I'm like, it's got its own thing, but it's like got the vibe. And those have been popping up in my feed lately where I'm like, oh, I wouldn't mind having one of those. They're very good looking watches.
Yeah, the Mayan watches are really well made. Yeah, it's I've seen another couple of YouTubers mispronounce this, but it's actually Mayan is the name of the ship. that bought the first Dutch settlers to New Amsterdam, as it was called at the time, or New York.
Yeah, they make a beautiful watch.
Yeah, I backed them on Kickstarter, actually.
Oh, okay.
The original one. That was one where now they're really good, but the Kickstarter, they were very let down by the supplier, but you could see where they were going. But there were certain things with the Kickstarter watch that were out of whack, basically.
Yeah.
But I ended up doing the review, and then I actually think I ended up returning it to them because there was a few things that the bezel was almost frozen in place, unfortunately, but they've definitely improved.
Yeah.
They've definitely improved. This is just they're a little bit too small for me nowadays. They used to do a 42 mil diver, but now they're all sort of 38 or less. I think they've just done a 36 chronograph, haven't they?
Oh, I haven't seen that one. That'll be interesting. So then I guess sort of our next topic on this conversation, this will be a short one. What makes a watch luxury? And the fact is, in today's world, every watch is a luxury watch. Other than a $15 Casio, because you don't have a cell phone, would be, and I don't say that to be derogatory. It just seems like I can't imagine anybody now not having a cell phone, at least in the Western world, because I think the overlords want us all to have a cell phone. Let's be real. So they've made them very accessible for pretty much everybody. So if you have a cell phone, you have the time. But that being said, we all know that in this circle. So what to you, Sam, says, well, this is a luxury watch?
This is a great question, because luxury is one of those terms that you can't really define.
Right.
During COVID, a lot of people thought toilet paper was a luxury.
Yes, good call.
But I think, to me, is the feel of the watch in the hand, especially if it's a bracelet watch. If I hold it in my hand, not put it on my wrist necessarily, but I'm just holding it in my hand, that feel, that like the warmth of the metal. And it's bizarre because sometimes you'll pick up a watch that is quite inexpensive and it does feel quite good quality. I keep going back to this, but the Invicta Pro Diver, that mechanical watch when it's got its own bracelet, like, it's not the most highest quality watch, but it has that kind of feel to it. And then, but then alternatively, I've held watches where I haven't liked the way they felt. The only Patek I've ever reviewed on the channel, the World Timer, has the World Time function where you press the button and the button essentially spins the disc of the countries around the capitals around the outside. But that doesn't feel like a smooth click. It feels more mechanical than I think it should do.
Okay.
So I thought I was going to get a super luxury vibe. The other thing as well, while I go off on a tangent on this, I don't find watches that, to me, feel luxury when I pick them up if they're not on a metal bracelet.
Yeah.
I think the metal bracelet adds to whatever undefinable whatever a luxury feel is.
Yeah.
I don't find the latest APs that were released, the Code 1159s, which I don't hate, but they come on like a nylon sailcloth strap, and some of those are like over $100,000, and it's on a nylon strap. I think, to me, a braceleted watch that feels nice in the hand, the way that the case, that time has been taken on the case and you can feel the bracelet, that's when you get a luxury feel. Tudor, obviously, Rolex and Breitling and stuff like that, when you pick them up in hand and they have the solidness to them, but also that's when a watch feels luxury to me.
So it's not really a price point for you. It's the overall experience of the watch.
Yes.
Okay. Interesting.
Because I think as I've got more into watch collecting, I almost don't think I would. Now, obviously, I probably wouldn't sink 30 grand on a watch, but I don't think I would enjoy wearing a watch that was very expensive, just because it's a lot of money to have on your wrist. And not that I'm worried about somebody stealing it or whatever, but also if something happens, that's a lot of money when you're wearing the price of a decent car on your wrist.
And that's probably more of a status thing for you and me. As far as, we're not at that level. The people who are buying $200,000 cars and they have 3 multi-million-dollar homes, that's nothing. That's like a Timex to them. So it's a whole different mindset you get into. Yeah. I would be freaked out if I have a $30,000 watch. I don't even know if I hit one door jam, I'd be like, oh, that's it. It's going in the vault. I can't wear it.
This is actually one of the true genius parts to give them props. The Apple Watch, isn't it? Because the Apple Watch, it transcends class, doesn't it? You wouldn't think, oh, how come that Dutch king is wearing a Apple Watch,
Yeah.
you wouldn't question it,
No.
would you? But if it was Bill Clinton when he was wearing his Timex 8 lap and everyone was taking the mick out of him being a president with a $20 Timex, it transcends, the Apple Watch kind of transcends that, I guess, all classes.
It does, and it is so feature rich that it's hard to put it down. And I think what's interesting is that people, the way you deal with that is, and you go out and you get your Louis Vuitton leather strap for your Apple Watch. It's all about the accessorizing of the watch as opposed to the watch head itself.
Oh, the Hermes. I mean, that was a stroke of genius by Hermes, wasn't it? Doing the straps for those.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was, and that's an interesting thing, because you could buy it directly from Apple and you're like, it's the same watch. How much are you charging me for that little piece of leather? Or whatever.
Well, what's interesting though is they soon dropped the gold cases. Didn't they? Remember the original Apple Watch came with a gold case, and I think it was $20,000 off. It was way over, wasn't it, than what you would expect? But they soon dropped that, didn't it? It was like those late 90s and early 2000s sort of pre-iPhone where you could get those. Remember those like Tag even made them high-end mobile phones.
Oh, yeah.
I forget that there was one brand that named them. I think it became the V. I can't remember it. But I think Tag Heuer even made a luxury mobile phone, like a BlackBerry style phone that was many thousands of dollars. I forget the name of this. Somebody will comment it, but I forget the name of the brand. But the iPhone, again, democratized all of that, didn't they? There's different versions of the iPhone, but there isn't I know there's third-party companies that add diamonds to iPhones, but as a rule, there isn't a status symbol iPhone that you can buy OEM from Apple. No. Whereas I remember the Tag phones.
No, that's funny. The status symbol of the iPhone is one that you cannot see. And it's not necessarily a status symbol, but I always buy the larger capacity hard drives because I do video and photo for work and also on the side. And so I always like to buy the big. And it's funny when I'm at the store and I'm like, I need the one that's the 512, and they're like, ooh, the 512. like I just ordered leather seats or something with my phone. Yeah. No one knows it's that. It looks the same as the one that's the baseline. It's just, it's not a status thing. It's just I need it for work. But
yes, you stealth well.
That's right. That's right. So but the other thing I think why, in my opinion, that gold one went away is people quickly realized it's a disposable watch. This is not something you're keeping for generations. So then you got to have some serious money to put $20,000 or whatever into an Apple Watch that like, well, it's worthless now, except for the gold.
Well, I remember these, going back to these. Let me find the name. Do you remember these phones? No. I don't just find. Let's have a look. I won't take long. If I can't find it, I won't take long. It began with a V. Taggy. Yeah, here it was. The Tag Heuer Link smartphone. But the other ones were called. Yeah, here it is. The Tag Heuer phone. But what was the other one called? 2011.
Not even that long ago.
Heuer smartphone. No, Tag Heuer smartphone. Yeah, but the other one it was called, because the thing with it was the phone was extremely expensive, but the thing that you paid for was it had a concierge button, and basically there was like a 24/7 concierge that you press the button and they would it was basically like a real person, but Siri. Like you would say, I need a restaurant recommendation or whatever.
You're buying a personal butler.
Yeah, these those high-end phones that I remember from the early 2000s, I think you could even swap the parts out, but that was the problem with that gold iPhone, wasn't there? There was no the gold Apple Watch. There was no path to ever upgrade it from what it was.
No,
I think even
and not to turn this into also not only the Christopher Ward channel but the Apple channel, because I think you and I are both Apple nerds. It's hard to beat that. I'm sorry, that ecosystem, and people all the time try to be like, oh no, my Samsung's better, my this, and I'm like, yeah, you know what? If it has one or two specs that may be better for a year or two. But when I'm an Apple guy and I have my phone and my watch and my HomePod and my iPad and my computer and my Apple TV and it all just works together, I don't care.
Yeah, it's funny. I've just actually moved a lot of my stuff. I had the Microsoft for a long time, the 365, because it had the terabyte of storage, but I've even moved away from that because they've just hiked the price up on that, like $100 a year at Apple again, because I'm in their ecosystem with a lot of stuff. I still won't go to the Apple Watch. But going back to talking about the smartwatches, do you remember, you might not remember this, but I think when Tag first bought out the Tag Connected, I think there was an upgrade option that you could put a mechanical movement in it after a certain period of time in the case.
Oh, that's smart. You know, they had sort of a contingency plan to keep that watch in the family, if so to speak, for longer than just, you know, the 2 or 3 year life cycle of the operating system.
Yeah, in fact, I even remember that Time and Tide did an article on it where they said that they would swap the smart module, the whole case, in other words, for a mechanical module, either a time-only automatic caliber 5 or a COSC-certified chronograph tourbillon, if you didn't like the smartwatch. I wonder how many people would actually did that. That would be quite an interesting thing to look at.
Yeah, it would be. That would be something fun to kind of dig into. So our next topic was we were going to talk about some options that would be the best alternatives to luxury watches. So I have a couple that I'm thinking of, and one, and there's another watch YouTuber. I don't know if he's still doing stuff. Oshin. He had a really interesting video. This was a number of years ago, where he was like, "This watch is better than my Submariner." I can't remember exactly it, but it was the Seiko King Turtle, and he had it in the green with the waffle dial, and that got me to really thinking. I then a couple of years later picked up the Seiko King Turtle Dark Manta with the rubber strap. And I'll tell you what, you're talking, first of all, we've talked about it before. Seiko makes a great watch that wears comfortably on the wrist. In the King Turtle, the rubber strap on that is wonderful material. I've tried putting it on other bracelets and straps, and I keep going back to the OEM one because it's so nice. It has a ceramic bezel. It has a sapphire crystal and a beautiful dial, and you wear that around, and if people don't know the name brands and they just saw that on your wrist, it is a blingy, good-looking watch that you can probably count on for the next 30 years. Probably not even have to get it serviced because Seiko watches just go and go and go. I've heard so many stories of people who've just never. I was like online, these guys are like, "This was my dad's Seiko diver. I don't think he ever serviced it ever. Still keeps great time." They're wonderful watches, and to me that's one of the ones right on my list where that is a great. I think it's $500 new, maybe $600. Great alternative to a luxury watch that will serve you many years, and I genuinely believe it's a great non-Christopher Ward option. But yeah, that's one of mine. What about you, Sam?
Obviously, Christopher Ward would be a good one for this because they are really building up their history as well, which is something I always like about watch brands, and that adds to the luxury for me.
Yeah.
I think I always recommend Hamilton because their watches always have a nice feel to them, don't they? I'm also a Seiko fan. I do like Seiko. I'm going to be doing some reviews this week I gave them a plug last week, but I'll give them a plug this week as well. Some of the Veil are sending me their watches in as well. Mm-hmm. I think they're really good. They have a blend of price ranges. And so you can start off pretty cheap with a Veya, but knowing that it's assembled in America and there's that whole vibe with it. And they have some really cool models as well. So I think that's also, I like the fact that like Veya's one, Zelos and Zianaco to a certain as well. All these watches that they have a really nice feel to them, but also it's quite cool that you'll likely never see somebody else out in the wild that will have that same watch.
Yeah. Another one for me, and I've talked about these guys on the channel before too, and I know you've done some reviews, so sue me, whatever. But I think, Sika Design makes a really good watch that if you like that Richard Mille aesthetic, which is not for everybody, it's a very specific or niche looking watch. But the one I got, can't remember the model, but it has sort of the lines of a Richard Mille, but it's not as thick. I think they're $289, and you can get them on sale on many times for $225, I think. I have probably 6 different silicone straps for, so I can just change out the color whenever I want. And when I've gotten more compliments when I wear that watch. As watch nerds, we keep hoping like people will notice what we're wearing and like, "Do you see what I have on today? I'm wearing this." That one has gotten me more compliments than I think most of my other watches because it is so striking looking. You're getting that whole vibe. The only thing I wish they had was a little more water resistance, but for $289, it's a very good feeling, well machined, well designed. Not even, it is homage-y, but it is its own from top to bottom, and they don't try to hide it. And I think they make a great watch that you can get that luxury feel for a very affordable price.
Yeah, what's wild about Sega Designs is, you're right, there is... It's almost a shame that we liken it to a Richard Mille because it's sort of partially skeletonized. But I think they do a good job of not making it look like a Richard Mille, which I think a lot of other people don't do well. A lot of, if you're trying to look a little bit like a Richard Mille, you end up looking absolutely like a 100%. Richard Mille. It's such a fine line.
Yeah.
But they won not for that one, but they even won a GPHG award for their Blue Planet watch, which is wild, really. And the ones that I've reviewed in the past, in-house, well, some of them are in-house movements, skeletonized. They have a lot of fun with their designs, and you're right, that does have a luxury feel to it. I would say even, obviously, on the higher end of that, sort of in the $2,000 range, is those Atawak watches that I've reviewed as well. Yeah. They have the series vibe of Urwerk, but without looking like a direct rip-off of one, but you're still getting that vibe. But with usually the base caliber is a Miyota 9000 series. So in theory, you could get it, even though it looks incredibly complicated with a wandering hour complication, you could still probably get it serviced or have that base module swapped out. And I suppose alternatives to luxury, what the threshold is, but I think Jack Mason do a good job of this. Nicholas at Fears
would be entry-level luxury for sure. Yeah, he's in the luxury world, but his watches are fantastic.
The jump hour,
that's super cool.
Jump hour with the Christopher Ward module. I mean, there's most jump hours you're getting up there, aren't they? Like the Langen's Zeitwerks is 35,000 or something.
Yeah. Well, and that brings up another point too, which is really funny because I think the normies have no idea how much watches really can get to. My friends will often come to me like, "Oh, I'm interested in a watch," and so okay, well, where do you want to spend? And we have that conversation. But if you told someone that Richard Mille watch that guy was wearing was $250,000, they'd be like, "Are you insane? Who would put that much money on their wrist?" And I'm like, "No, but that is a watch that." When we talk about homages, like, I don't care if you buy that. It's because most 99.9% of the world is not buying a $250,000 watch. And I don't think those F1 drivers are even buying them, right? Like, they just get them. They're just given to them.
Yeah, it's funny. You made me think of the only film in history where everything happens in the first 10 minutes. You get the gist of it and you don't really need to watch the rest of it. But Alec Baldwin in Glengarry Glen Ross, when he's such an iconic film. When he's doing his speech to, if anybody's not seen it, he's going in to basically give a pep talk to an underperforming set of real estate agents, and he's come from like the head company, Mitch and Murray, and he's come to Glengarry Glen Ross to really give them some shtick about the fact that they haven't hit their sales target. But part of it is he takes off he's got a 36 mil president or something Rolex, and he's lauding it around like he is the top of the chain, and he can afford a gold Rolex, which I think that was early 90s, wasn't it? It probably wasn't that expensive, the president.
No.
But that's what I think, that Hollywood sort of vibe is where I think a lot of people who aren't into watches think that Rolex is like the top. That is the top that you can get to.
Which is I agree. They think that's just it. That's the most expensive watches out there. We always had to talk about Rolex, but they have done a good job of making the world think that they are the most expensive watches out there when they are just, by many people's standards, entry-level luxury as well. They're not really there. They're trying to move out of entry-level to mid-tier luxury, but
I tell you who else has done a really good job of that. It always makes me smile, and I think our UK listeners will also get a smile out of this. But I think Stella, the beer, has done an excellent job in the US of making the US consumer think it's a sophisticated continental French lager, whereas in the UK it's like a session beer if you really want to get quite drunk.
So Stella is sort of like, what would that be like Keystone in America?
Well, it's still a respected lager, but it was quite funny. And this happened. I guess this was early 2000s. Probably UK listeners will know this, but they started doing billboards. And if you search on Google, Stella only 5 ingredients, they started doing these billboards that said it only has 5 ingredients in it, because a lot of people, especially when they're attending football matches and things like that, were getting quite drunk on Stella, and there was a bit of fisticuffs. And there's something in this beer that's making people go. But then Stella's like, no, it's only, and it is as a joke, it is only 5. Don't sue me, Stella. It is only 5 ingredients. But it was funny that they kind of ran this ad campaign about it. But they've done quite a good job of. And then they started serving the beer instead of a Stella pint glass, they served it in what they called the chalice.
Yeah.
Wine glass, which I think that was kind of more of a visual of, this is a premium lager, and if you were attending a football match, perhaps you're not wanting to drink out of what looked like a large vase.
This may go way off topic here, but I remember, speaking of that, I remember there was like a big news story talking about that very specific phenomenon in like the 80s, early 90s. I don't remember where. And they actually explained why that happened. Did you ever see that? Why there tend to be a proclivity for that beyond the fact that British people are very passionate about their football? And it had to do with the fact that they'd be drinking a bunch of beer, sure, but then they didn't want to lose their space, especially in the standing room area. And so men would tend to just urinate right where they stood on the ground. And they said what happens is when you have a bunch of young men, the pheromone from that makes them more aggressive. And it was really because of that. It got them fired up, and it was all happening at a subconscious level. And I thought,
I have never heard that before, but I don't doubt it.
It was a really interesting news story. I remember if it was on 60 Minutes or something, but I was like, well, that is wild, just the sort of hormonal effect it was having. And they were like, this is why we think it had
like a pack of wolves marking their territory.
It was a very, we're way off topic. We're on casual beer talk, everybody. So buckle up.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway.
That's hilarious.
Yeah. Well, I feel like we've covered our topic today.
We went off a few different tangents there, but what we would really like to do is hear from you. So what does luxury mean to you? Drop us a comment or drop us an email over at the Casual Watch Reviewer, or drop us a DM on Instagram, Casual Watch Reviews, or maybe let us know what your best alternatives are to luxury watches as well. And one other avenue which we don't talk about is every Sunday on YouTube, Casual Watch Reviews, we do the live stream Casual Watch Talk Sunday Social, 4:30 Eastern, 9:30 GMT time, PM. Come over there, join, get involved in the conversation, ask us questions live. We would love to hear from you. And then every other week, we do a members only live stream. So become a member over on YouTube. Join us on the members only live stream. Get your questions answered directly. Well, Todd, that was quite a good show.
I think that was a lot of fun. And, we are Casual Watch Talk, which means we can casually talk about the topic and the topics of the day.
Absolutely. We really appreciate you listening. And we'll see you next time on Casual Watch Talk Podcast.
Bye, everybody.